What if I told you that the two most talked about royal children of the modern age, Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, may not be who the world thinks they are? That everything, from their birth announcements to their blurred-out cameos on Netflix, might have been part of an elaborate illusion? And now, after years of silence, speculation, and swirling conspiracy theories, King Charles himself has shattered the wall of secrecy. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. He's finally revealed what he claims is the truth. A truth so stunning, so bizarre, and so shattering to the monarchy's carefully crafted image, it has left royal watchers, loyalists, and even palace insiders reeling. Because according to Charles, Archie and Lilibet weren't just kept away from the public for privacy. They were never truly part of the royal bloodline to begin with. Rented, borrowed, contracted. Take a breath. Now ask yourself this. Why would a reigning monarch risk nuclear-level scandal to say something so outrageous? Unless he felt cornered? Unless someone was threatening to leak the truth first? Unless the truth was even worse than the rumor? Let's be clear. We're not just talking about a salacious headline. We're talking about a potential constitutional crisis. About the royal line of succession. About deception at the highest level of the British monarchy. But before we get to Charles's stunning revelation, we have to go back. Because none of this started with the press, or with Netflix, or even with Meghan and Harry stepping down. No, it started the day Meghan Markle first stepped into Kensington Palace, and the machinery of myth-making began. Remember the fairy tale? The American actress, the charming prince, the glamorous wedding. The world was captivated. This was supposed to be Diana's son finally finding happiness, healing, a fresh start for the royal family. But behind the palace walls, tension was already brewing. Staff resignations, leaks to the press, allegations of bullying, and then the pregnancies. Or were they? That's the question that started it all. Let's talk about Archie first. He was born in May 2019, but his debut was unlike anything royal watchers had ever seen. No traditional photo on the Lindo Wing steps. No public appearances. No hospital confirmation. Just a heavily curated image at Windsor Castle days later. Harry, Meghan, and a sleeping baby wrapped in white. But here's the twist. Even the photo raised eyebrows. Not because of what was in it, but because of what wasn't. There was no royal medical staff present. No witnesses from the Queen's doctors. No independent confirmation of Meghan even being admitted to a hospital. And when journalists asked, politely, at first, they were stonewalled. Why all the secrecy? Why break decades of tradition? Was it just privacy? Or was it about hiding something? Because around that time, whispers started circulating in very tight circles that Meghan may not have carried Archie herself, that a surrogate may have been used. Now, before we dive headfirst into that possibility, let's pause. Why would this even matter? Here's why. According to royal protocol and the line of succession, only natural-born heirs of royal blood, born from the royal line and within the confines of clear documentation, can be considered legitimate. And that's where it gets murky. Because if Archie wasn't carried by Meghan, if the birth wasn't properly recorded, if a surrogate was involved without transparency, then, in the strictest legal interpretation, Archie might not qualify as a legitimate royal heir. And Lilibet? Well, that's an even stranger story. She was born in California, on American soil, with no British medical oversight, no palace statement beyond a simple announcement, no official registry accessible to the British press. For months, no one saw her. Then one blurry photo, then another. But royal fans noticed strange inconsistencies. Her hair color changed. Her eye shape seemed different from one image to the next. Were they just babies growing? Or were different children being presented at different times? It sounds like something out of a bad political thriller, right? But here's the kicker. Multiple palace insiders, those who've since left their posts, have said off the record that Charles always harbored doubts. Not because he didn't love Harry, not because he disliked Meghan, but because nothing added up. The timelines, the paperwork, the photos, the secrecy. And when he asked questions, he was shut down, silenced, told to focus on his duties and let the Sussexes do things their way. But Charles is now king, and the pressure has shifted. Because with the Queen gone, and with William preparing to take on more responsibility, there's a growing sense that the monarchy needs clarity. needs truth, needs transparency. So, after years of files being buried, NDAs being signed, and staffers being dismissed, Charles has allegedly broken rank. In a conversation leaked from a closed-door royal family meeting, sources say Charles admitted he had proof that Archie and Lilibet were not biologically related to Meghan, and potentially not even to Harry. Now let that sink in. The King of England has supposedly acknowledged that 2 of his grandchildren may not be his grandchildren at all. And here's the twist. He doesn't blame Harry. He blames her. He believes Meghan orchestrated everything. The surrogacy, the secrecy, the legal shielding, the press manipulation. And according to sources, Charles believes Meghan had help from a circle of elite lawyers, from Netflix executives, from certain members of Meghan's old Hollywood PR team. He believes it was all a plan to cement herself as mother to royal heirs, to build an empire, to use those children, innocent or not, as leverage against the institution. And it worked, at least until now, because someone close to Charles, an aide who allegedly had access to sealed files, decided to come clean. A document was uncovered, a contract, signed in 2018, outlining the terms of a confidential surrogacy arrangement. Names redacted, locations blacked out. But one detail stood out. The child would be available for photographic use as required to support public narrative. That's not how a real birth certificate reads. That's how a casting agreement reads. Now, imagine being the king, reading that, and realizing you've been lied to, that your son has been used, that your grandchildren, real or not, may be part of a media strategy, not a family tree. Charles was reportedly devastated, and he made a decision. If the truth was coming out anyway, better it come from him. He would speak, even if it broke the monarchy, even if it shattered Harry, even if it humiliated the crown. Because this time, silence was no longer an option. But here's the haunting part. When Charles decided to speak, he made one final phone call. Not to William, not to Camilla, to Harry. What was said? We'll get to that. Because the response Harry gave would stun the king, would divide the family, and would ultimately push Charles to do something no monarch has done in centuries. What was it? You're about to find out. But first, let's rewind to the beginning of the deception, to the carefully staged image of a new royal family, to the illusion. Let's go back to the moment the world was sold a fairy tale. Because what comes next will change everything you thought you knew. What does a lie look like when it's wrapped in royal silk? What does it feel like when the world claps for a performance, completely unaware they've just witnessed one? Because that's exactly what the British public and the world was unknowingly pulled into. A royal charade. One that began the moment Harry and Meghan stood on the balcony of Kensington Palace, holding hands, smiling, waving to the cameras. And behind those smiles, an agenda. Now let's not pretend this was just a love story. This was a production. From the very beginning, the image was everything. The American actress turned Duchess. The prince with Diana's charm and just enough rebellion to seem relatable. Together, they were glossy. Glossy enough to fool the world. But what if the illusion started long before Archie's birth? What if it started with the need for a child? Not the desire, the need. Because after the royal wedding, something became painfully obvious. Meghan Markle was a celebrity in a royal cage. No Instagram. No red carpet appearances. No personal interviews. Everything had to be filtered through palace protocol. But there was a loophole. Children. Royal children could command attention, open doors, and generate global press. They could reset the narrative. And Meghan knew it. So just months after the wedding, the announcement came. She was pregnant. Cue the headlines. The public excitement. The breathless coverage. But behind the scenes, aides were confused. Very confused. One former palace staffer, speaking under strict anonymity, shared what she described as the strangest pregnancy in royal history. According to her, Meghan refused all standard royal maternity protocol. She wouldn't allow the Queen's gynecologist, a centuries-old tradition for royal births. She demanded her own medical team. She canceled all tours involving potential Zika virus exposure, then reversed course at the last minute. But here's what really raised eyebrows: the baby bump. It changed. Dramatically. In size. In position. In structure. Some days it seemed impossibly high. Other days, it drooped. Footage from public appearances showed Meghan bending down in ways no pregnant woman in her third trimester would. heels, squatting, dancing. There were rumors of padding, of prosthetics. The bump once folded during a live interview. Do you remember that viral clip? Meghan sat down, and the belly appeared to collapse, just slightly. Not enough to be called out by mainstream media, but enough to send online sleuths into a frenzy. YouTube exploded. Reddit threads lit up. And yet, the press stayed silent. Why? Because criticizing Meghan, especially on issues like pregnancy, was deemed too risky, too politically radioactive. But royal insiders noticed. Some even filed private complaints. But they were ignored. Or worse, transferred. Because by then, Meghan and Harry had pulled away from palace control. They were modernizing the monarchy, breaking rules, doing things their way. And then came the birth, or what the palace said was the birth. May 6, 2019. The world expected tradition. A hospital photo. An announcement from the Lindo wing. A beaming Meghan holding her newborn outside St. Mary's. Instead, silence. No photo. No hospital. Just a vague statement that Meghan went into labor in the early hours. Then, hours later, another statement. She had given birth. Confused yet? So were journalists. In fact, BBC's royal correspondent called it one of the most bizarre communications in royal history. Because by the time the palace announced she was in labor, she had already given birth. And to this day, no official birth certificate with a hospital name has been released. Only one with the names, dates, and a private location. That location? Still unknown. And when Meghan and Harry finally emerged with baby Archie, it wasn't on the hospital steps. It was 2 days later. Inside Windsor Castle. A highly controlled photo op. No crowd. No doctors. No press questions. Just two parents. A sleeping baby wrapped in white. And a confused audience wondering, why break every royal tradition? Was it for privacy? Or was it to avoid something being seen? A scar? A witness? A surrogate? Ask yourself, why would Meghan, a woman who had filmed dozens of press-heavy events, suddenly become camera-shy at the moment every royal woman is celebrated for? Was it anxiety? Or was it control? Control of the narrative. Control of the baby's origin. Control of the illusion. Because from that moment forward, Archie would rarely be seen. No christening open to the public. No baby photos on the Queen's birthday. No trooping the color appearance. Every child of William and Kate had been presented proudly. But Archie? He became a phantom. And every time someone asked where he was, why he wasn't at Balmoral, or Sandringham, or even present during major family holidays, the response was the same. They're a private family now. But what if privacy was just the excuse? What if the truth was that showing Archie too often risked the illusion unraveling? You see, babies grow. And sometimes they don't look the same from photo to photo. And sometimes that's a problem. Especially if there's more than one child being used for public appearances. Too far-fetched? Let's go back to that 2019 Christmas card. Remember the digitally altered image of Harry, Meghan, and baby Archie? Even experts questioned the lighting and angles. One forensic imaging analyst said the child's head appeared to be comped in. Another pointed out that the eyes didn't match earlier photos. Now, why would a new parent digitally edit their baby? Unless they needed to. To mask something. To replace something. To sell something. The perfect illusion. That's what it was. A staged narrative. One that Meghan and Harry thought they could control forever. But here's the problem with illusions. They require consistency. And the more time passed, the more cracks formed. Meghan's ever-changing baby bump. The ever-shifting due dates. The refusal to confirm hospitals. The lack of public witnesses. And the overwhelming secrecy surrounding even the most mundane details. Why such intense control? Unless they were hiding something very, very inconvenient. Or worse. Something contractually bound. And remember, this is only Archie. Lilibet's case is even more chaotic. But we'll get there. For now, ask yourself, if the palace was told Archie's birth was normal, why did Charles request a private investigation? Why did staffers report being told never to ask questions about the baby's arrival? And why, years later, is King Charles suddenly breaking his silence? What happened behind the scenes to make him speak? What finally forced the mask to fall? And most chillingly, what was found in the paperwork labeled Project Lamb? Because according to palace insiders, that was the code name given to a file hidden deep inside the firm's private archive. A file marked For eyes only. His Majesty's attention required. What's in it? You're not ready. But in the next chapter, we're opening that file. And what it contains will shake the monarchy to its core. What would you do if you stumbled upon a document that confirmed your worst fear? Not a rumor, not a whisper, not a tabloid headline, but an official, signed, sealed document, buried under years of secrecy, marked for eyes only. Because that's exactly what King Charles reportedly found. A file that should have been destroyed, a contract that should have never existed, and a signature that proved everything had been orchestrated from the very beginning. But before we open that file, let's rewind to how it was found, because the story behind its discovery is just as twisted as what it contains. It began not in a royal palace, but in a dusty storage room beneath Clarence's house. During the early months of Charles's reign, there was a mass internal audit ordered across all royal residences. The objective? Streamline the archives, digitize everything, clear out decades of bureaucratic clutter, routine stuff. Until one assistant found a slim black folder jammed between two ledger books. It had no title on the spine, no markings, just a royal seal. And inside, a single document with one line handwritten at the top. Project Lamb, final agreement. Now let that settle for a moment. Why would a royal document, involving one of the most tightly guarded scandals in modern royal history, be codenamed Project Lamb? Was it a religious metaphor? A symbolic warning? Or something far more literal? The staffer didn't recognize the code, but they knew one thing immediately. This wasn't meant for general eyes. It was sent directly to the Palace Archives team, flagged as Royal Priority Clearance. Within 24 hours, King Charles was sitting in his private study, staring down at what might be the most dangerous piece of paper in the monarchy's vault. Let's break down what the file reportedly contained, because every line reads like a scandal scripted for streaming. Line 1, Subject A. Term agreement for contracted maternity services. Confidential gestational surrogacy arrangement to be enacted Q3 2018, Q2 2019. Wait, what? Let's pause. That phrase alone, contracted maternity services, already destroys the entire Sussex narrative. Because if Meghan Markle was not the biological mother of Archie, and instead entered into a private surrogate agreement, then the palace and the public were lied to on a massive scale. Now maybe you're thinking, surrogacy isn't illegal. That's true, but in royal protocol, it's not about legality. It's about lineage. It's about blood. And if Meghan used a surrogate, but publicly claimed she carried Archie herself, it's more than just a private matter. It's a constitutional bombshell. Because royal succession relies on verified, traceable heritage. And Project Lamb, it was designed to bury that truth. The document outlined not just the timeline of the pregnancy, but a full agreement between Subject A and a third-party maternity coordinator based in California. This wasn't a backdoor handshake deal. It was a legally binding, notarized contract with payment terms, service clauses, and, most chillingly, image usage rights. Yes, image rights. One clause, verbatim, stated, "The child/children resulting from this arrangement may be featured in limited press, media, and social campaigns, provided the likeness is consistent with the narrative of the principal parties." Likeness, narrative. These aren't words used by expectant parents. These are words used by publicists, by branding teams, by showrunners. And that's when it hit Charles, according to sources. This wasn't just a surrogacy. This was casting. Now, you're probably wondering, who signed this document? Here's the jaw-dropper. The signature line reads, Rachel Meghan Markle. No title, no Duchess prefix, no indication she was acting in a royal capacity, just her Hollywood name, the name she used on her acting contracts, on her early IMDb page, on her old call sheets from Suits. It gets worse, because another signature appears below hers. M. Henstridge, Principal Coordinator, Oak Hill Surrogacy Limited, a company based in Los Angeles, a company that has since dissolved. But during its operation, it was known for celebrity discretion and narrative-consistent family planning. That's not a joke. That was lifted directly from their archived website copy. So now you have a Hollywood actress, married into the royal family, signing a contract with a private California surrogacy firm, within months of joining the firm. And it was all kept secret. How? Because Meghan and Harry reportedly used a network of offshore legal firms to funnel communications and payments through third parties. Palace insiders say the Queen was never briefed. Charles wasn't told until after Archie's birth. And Harry? Some sources claim even he didn't know the full truth. Let that sink in. The man we believe to be Archie's father, possibly unaware of the actual biological arrangement? It sounds impossible, but think about it. Harry has admitted, repeatedly, that he was isolated, that Meghan took over all PR, scheduling, and medical discussions. He even said in their Netflix docuseries that he was often told what to say, what to wear, and when to speak. Could she have shielded the full scope of Project Lamb, even from him? Or was he complicit? The truth may lie in a second folder discovered weeks later. This one was marked, Addendum, June 2019. Inside, a non-disclosure agreement signed by 3 individuals. An anonymous birthing coordinator, a private Beverly Hills attorney, and a British press liaison tied to Meghan's media team. The NDA included severe financial penalties for unauthorized discussion of maternity sourcing, reproductive assistance, or genealogical details of minor parties. Translation: anyone caught talking about Archie's origins would be sued into silence. And here's where things get really dark. A final note, scribbled in the margin, believed to be by Charles himself. Simply read, what else haven't they told us? Because if there was a Project Lamb for Archie, was there a similar file for Lilibet? And if Charles had only just discovered this document in 2023, who had been protecting it all those years? Who had authorized it? And more importantly, was someone inside the palace helping Meghan keep it buried? Because that would mean treason. It would mean betrayal at the deepest level of the crown. Now pause and ask yourself, how does a contract like this even get written without raising alarms? How do doctors, staffers, royal advisors all stay silent? How does a pregnancy happen without a trace of medical paperwork? Unless someone made sure every trace was wiped. Unless Meghan wasn't just orchestrating her own narrative, but had help at the highest levels of media, law, and yes, maybe even inside the firm. Project Lamb wasn't just a document. It was a blueprint for illusion. And as King Charles sat staring at it, frozen, shaken, one phrase kept replaying in his mind, the one that appeared just before the signature lines. Subject to full destruction within 36 months of child's delivery. But it hadn't been destroyed. Why? Who forgot? Or did someone keep it as leverage? Blackmail? Insurance? Because 3 days after Charles reviewed that file, something else happened. An anonymous email arrived in the Royal Communications Office. Untraceable. Encrypted. Just 2 words in the subject line. Lilibet next. He was hired to protect them, to keep their secrets safe, to guard their movements, their homes, their children, if they had children at all. But what happens when the person sworn to protect you becomes the one who knows too much? What happens when a silent witness to the Sussexes' most private moments decides to speak? And most chilling of all, what happens when he says he saw things that should have been impossible? This is the story of the bodyguard who wasn't supposed to exist on paper, who never gave interviews, who never wrote a book, who faded into the background, until he didn't, until King Charles's private investigator found him. And what he revealed would rattle the monarchy to its core. But let's rewind. Because this man, whom we'll call David for his protection, wasn't just any security hire. He was ex-military, decorated, experienced in international extraction, executive protection, and high-level intelligence. Before Meghan and Harry, he'd worked for a billionaire family in Dubai. Before that, with foreign dignitaries. So why take a gig with the royals? Simple. Meghan insisted. According to leaked correspondence, Meghan personally requested external, non-royal security staff for private events and sensitive transport moments. Translation: she didn't trust the palace detail. She wanted her own. And David was placed on a private contract, hired through a third-party agency based in California, flown to the UK discreetly, and assigned to cover 3 specific time periods. And here's where it gets strange. All 3 assignments coincided with pivotal moments in Meghan's so-called pregnancy. Assignment 1, late January 2019, weeks after Meghan's public baby bump first appeared. David was flown into London with 0 media announcement. He was assigned to a property in the Cotswolds. Not Frogmore, not Kensington, A private estate, off the books. Assignment 2. March 2019, 2 months before Archie's supposed birth. David was stationed at a secluded house near Oxfordshire. Same agency. Same terms. Assignment 3, May 2019. The exact week Meghan was said to have given birth. He wasn't assigned to the hospital. He was assigned to a special transport unit, shuttling back and forth between an unnamed private residence and a medical facility in Berkshire. That doesn't have a maternity ward. Why? Why would a bodyguard, trained for high-risk extraction, be sent to monitor empty roads outside a non-maternity clinic? Unless there was someone else being transported. Someone whose identity had to be kept hidden. When Charles's investigator found David, months after the Project Lamb file was unearthed, he asked him one question. "Did you see the baby?" David paused, and then quietly said, "No, but I saw her." The her he's referring to? Not Meghan, but a woman in her 20s. Blonde, petite, nervous. He claims she was escorted, late at night, into a back entrance of the Berkshire facility. Escorted by 2 women and a man he didn't recognize. She was clutching her stomach, breathing heavily, and according to David, she was pregnant. Very pregnant. He didn't speak to her. He wasn't allowed to. But he remembers her face. Because 4 months later, he saw it again. On a surrogacy website that had been quietly scrubbed from the internet. He tried to report it to his agency. They told him to forget it. Don't ask questions, they warned. And that's when David knew something wasn't right. He started connecting the dots. The late-night transports. The NDA-laced schedules. The unexplained gaps in Meghan's whereabouts. And most disturbingly, the lack of any infant crying. That's right. According to David, in all 3 assignments, none of which were short. He never once heard a baby cry. Not during transport. Not in the residences. Not even when assigned to late-night watch. He thought maybe the baby wasn't there. But how could that be? This was post-birth. Archie was supposed to be swaddled in blankets, resting in bassinets, bonding with his parents. But the house was always eerily silent. When he asked another guard if the baby had been moved to another wing, the man just shrugged. "They don't keep him here," he said cryptically. David didn't press. Until now. Because Charles's investigator presented him with a copy of the Project Lamb contract, names redacted. But David recognized one of the facilities listed. He'd been there. Twice. Once during the January assignment. Once in May. And that's when everything clicked. The birthing suite. The woman escorted in. The medical bags being loaded in, but not out. The heavily veiled guest, who was never seen again. David said something that made Charles reportedly go cold. They smuggled her in before dawn, and smuggled the baby out after dark. Who they were remains a mystery. But someone paid for the cover-up. And when David pressed his own agency for answers, he was fired. Let go. Quietly. Without a reference. Told to sign an exit NDA. He didn't. And that's how Charles found him. Because in David's personal files, still untouched, was a small slip of paper. A receipt. From May 4th, 2019. It showed mileage logged to and from a private estate in Oxfordshire. Exact location? The same one listed under delivery staging in the Project Lamb file. A match. And on the back of that receipt, scribbled in pencil, 2 names. One was Archie, the other? Undecipherable. But Charles reportedly recognized the surname. It matched one of Meghan's former agents in Los Angeles. Coincidence? Or evidence of coordination? Now let's pause here. Because maybe you're thinking, okay, this is all circumstantial. A bodyguard sees a pregnant woman. He doesn't hear a baby. He's fired. Not proof, right? Except, there's more. David claims that during his second assignment, in March, he overheard a conversation between Meghan and her assistant, while stationed outside a closed-door hallway. The assistant reportedly said, "The real problem is timing. We can't have her go into labor while Meg is still scheduled to appear in public." To which Meghan allegedly replied, "Then make sure she doesn't." Those were her words. Make sure she doesn't. Now ask yourself, what woman, pregnant herself, refers to another woman's labor as a problem? Unless that labor was the real birth. The one that had to be concealed. The one that had to be timed perfectly so that Meghan could debut Archie as her own just days later. This wasn't just secrecy. This was a performance. And David? He was one of the only people who saw the stage being built. But there's one last thing he revealed. something that even Charles's investigator hadn't considered. David said he once saw Meghan rehearsing with a baby carrier. Rehearsing, not casually practicing, but repeating the same movement, again and again, looking into a mirror, lifting the carrier, smiling, adjusting the blanket, repeating it, like a scene, like a script, as if preparing to be photographed. Now pause and ask yourself, would a real mother, days before giving birth, be rehearsing her hospital exit pose? Or would she be resting, recovering, living the moment? Because to David, it looked like a media dry run, a scene for the perfect illusion. And when the real baby arrived, she wouldn't be anywhere near the cameras. Not yet. Not until the narrative had been solidified. Not until the world believed. But David's role didn't end there. He had one final assignment, though brief. A fly-in, fly-out gig in California, 2021. Post-Megxit, post-Netflix, post-Lilibet. And what he saw during that trip would raise even more disturbing questions. Because it involved a second child, and another woman, and the name Project Rose. But we'll get there, because first, we need to talk about Charles, and what happened the moment he read David's report. They say kings are trained not to show emotion, but when Charles finished reading, he didn't speak for a full 5 minutes. Then he whispered one sentence to his aide. Find out who paid for this. Because someone bankrolled this deception. And the money trail? It doesn't lead where you think. What happens when a king looks in the mirror and wonders if the very bloodline he was born to protect has already been corrupted? What happens when a father, already scarred by decades of scandal, discovers a secret so disturbing, so explosive, that even he doesn't know where to begin? Because the moment King Charles read the report from David, the bodyguard who saw too much, the illusion collapsed. The staged photographs, the mysterious contracts, the ever-growing list of lies. Charles had spent years brushing off rumors about Archie and Lilibet's origins as tabloid garbage, bitter gossip, or conspiracy clickbait. But now he had evidence. Paper trails, eyewitness accounts, and a timeline so airtight, it could no longer be dismissed as fantasy. And what shook him to the core was that he had been complicit by silence. Not actively, perhaps, but passively, because he had looked the other way. He had believed what he wanted to believe, that his youngest son, his Diana's boy, was happy, that his family was healing, that Archie and Lilibet were his grandchildren in every sense that mattered. But now, he wasn't even sure if Harry knew the truth, and that realization broke him. Let's rewind. In the days following the discovery of Project Lamb and David's chilling testimony, Charles disappeared from public view. No scheduled meetings, no media appearances. He cleared his calendar, retreated to Highgrove House. Only his closest aides were allowed in. Camilla stayed at Clarence's house. William wasn't even informed. And there, behind locked doors, Charles fell into what some insiders called a silent storm. Not yelling, not crying, just processing. Because this wasn't just about Meghan anymore. It wasn't even about the children. It was about legacy. Charles had spent his entire adult life waiting for the crown. Through scandal after scandal. Diana, Camilla, the Tampongate tapes, the death of his ex-wife, public loathing, public forgiveness. He had finally become king. But now, less than a year into his reign, his monarchy was at risk of unraveling from the inside. Because if Archie and Lilibet weren't legitimate royal heirs, what did that mean for the line of succession? What did it mean for the very idea of monarchy? If the people discovered that deception this elaborate could happen under Buckingham Palace's watch, could the institution survive? Or worse, would it deserve to? These were the thoughts racing through his mind as he paced the library at 3:42 a.m., still in his shirt and slacks, clutching the folder that had upended his world. But even deeper than the political implications was the personal devastation. Charles had loved those children, even from afar. He had framed photos of Archie in his study. He'd written letters to Lilibet, letters that were never answered. He'd left gifts under the tree for both children during Christmas, even after the Sussexes left the UK. And now he had to ask himself the unthinkable. Had he been sending gifts to strangers? That question haunted him. Because if these children weren't Meghan's biologically, and potentially not Harry's either, then who were they? Where did they come from? Who chose them? And why? These weren't just moral dilemmas. These were constitutional threats. Because every royal child is logged into official succession registries. Every birth recorded, documented, verified by Crown-appointed medical professionals. But Archie's paperwork had holes. Lilibet's? Even worse. In fact, Lilibet's entire birth certificate was filed in California with inconsistencies that would have disqualified her in any formal aristocratic lineage test. So Charles did what monarchs rarely do. He called a lawyer, a private one, trusted for years. The same solicitor who had once handled discreet affairs for the Queen during the Diana years. And he asked, "If this is true, does that make Harry's children illegitimate?" The lawyer hesitated, then quietly said, "If the birth details are falsified, yes. They would not be in the line of succession, nor would they retain titles under traditional law." Charles went pale. "Even if Harry believes they're his?" "Yes, sir." And that's when Charles made a decision. He needed the truth from the one person who could give it. "Harry, but how do you ask your son if his children are real? How do you gently suggest that his entire family might be a PR mirage? You don't. You just call." And Charles did. At 8:15 p.m., he placed a direct call to Montecito. Harry picked up. There was silence at first. Then Charles reportedly said, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer me honestly." "Please." Harry replied, "All right." And Charles asked, "Do you know who the biological mother of Archie is?" What followed was not denial, not anger, not confusion, just a pause. Then Harry responded, "Dad, what are you talking about?" Charles pushed. He referenced the documents, the contract, the bodyguard's testimony, and according to sources, Harry said something that shook Charles even more than a confession. He said, "You're listening to them again. You always listen to them. You never trusted us." It wasn't a denial. It wasn't an answer. It was a deflection, and Charles knew it. He didn't press further. The call ended cold. But the damage was done, and for Charles, something had shifted. He realized Harry either didn't know the truth, or worse, he did, and was protecting Meghan at all costs. And that meant only one thing. Charles could no longer rely on Harry to come clean, so he would have to dig deeper. He ordered a full internal audit of all Sussex-related finances, security reports, and travel logs dating back to 2018. He authorized access to restricted birth archives, sealed under Meghan's privacy requests, and he quietly reopened a royal commission that had been shut down after Megxit. But most critically, Charles instructed one of his most trusted aides to begin discreet talks with Parliament. Because if the allegations proved true, the monarchy would need a legal path to remove Archie and Lilibet from the line of succession. Not publicly, not yet, but quietly, legally, in the shadows. A contingency plan. Because Charles wasn't just protecting the monarchy anymore. He was protecting the truth. And that truth was getting uglier by the day, especially when new information emerged about Lilibet. Because while Archie's deception had been executed with caution the second time around, they got sloppy, and someone very close to Meghan was ready to talk. A woman who had signed an NDA. A woman with photos. And a name that appeared in another royal file. This one labeled Project Rose. She vanished just before the wedding. No social media posts. No tabloid photos. No paparazzi trails. She was there 1 minute, whispered about in the corridors of Soho House, Toronto, and then gone. Some said she'd been paid off. Others said she was a ghost, someone invented by online conspiracists to explain gaps in Meghan's pregnancy timeline. But she was real, and she was about to reappear. This is the story of the woman now believed to be the biological mother, or at the very least the gestational surrogate, for Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor. Her name? Redacted in all official records. But those close to her call her S. She was in her 20s. Canadian. Worked at a high-end wellness spa frequented by actors, stylists, and yoga instructors. She wasn't a celebrity, but she moved in celebrity-adjacent circles. And one of her regular clients was Jessica Mulroney, Meghan Markle's best friend at the time. In 2017, S posted an Instagram photo, since deleted, of a trip to London. It showed her outside Buckingham Palace with the caption, "Next time, I'll be inside. Watch me." At the time, nobody noticed it. Why would they? She was just a pretty girl with a mysterious sense of ambition. But in 2022, after King Charles launched his quiet internal audit, that same girl reappeared in the files of a now-defunct Toronto fertility clinic. Her name matched the alias listed under Project Rose. Same initials, same birthday, same signature. and one note scribbled in the margin of her intake form. Contractual. Intended parents residing in the United States. Clearance pending. Now here's where it gets wild. The clinic itself was never meant to be found. It operated under a shell corporation, closed shop in early 2021, and wiped most of its digital footprint. But Charles's investigator tracked down one of its former administrative assistants. And she remembered S. She remembered her coming in, being nervous. She remembered her carrying a sealed envelope handed over by a woman with an American accent and a very expensive bag. That woman, she couldn't name her, but she described her as mixed race, petite, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. When shown a photo of Meghan from that same time, she hesitated, then nodded. So let's connect the dots. A Canadian woman in her 20s, known by Meghan's inner circle, visits a fertility clinic under a contract listed for U.S. intended parents, is possibly escorted by Meghan herself, and disappears for a year, only to resurface months after Lilibet's birth. Coincidence? Or cover-up? Let's rewind a bit further. In early 2021, Meghan and Harry announced they were expecting their second child. It was Valentine's Day. They released a black-and-white photo of Meghan lying on Harry's lap, cradling a visible bump. Photographed by Miss Harriman, a friend. Taken remotely, over FaceTime, allegedly. But here's the thing. Photographic analysts, yes, they exist, noticed something odd. The shadows in the image didn't match natural lighting. Meghan's bump looked suspiciously symmetrical. Too perfect. And her posture? Reclined in a way that most women in their second trimester would find deeply uncomfortable. Again, like Archie's bump, questions arose. Was it real? Or was it staged? And now that S had resurfaced, those questions had new fuel. Because shortly after that Valentine's Day announcement, S was spotted at a private medical spa in Vancouver, visibly pregnant, accompanied by a man later identified as a former Netflix security consultant. He wasn't just a bodyguard. He was the same man listed in transport logs for Project Lamb. So now he's back for Project Rose. This wasn't a one-time operation. This was repeat business. So who is S? According to what little could be verified, she was approached by someone from Meghan's former PR firm in late 2020, offered a life-changing sum of money, told that it would involve discreet participation in a private family matter, told that she would be helping a new kind of royal family. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because S didn't fully understand what she was signing. She thought she was donating eggs. That's what the contract said, in veiled language. But once she became pregnant, confirmed via IVF, she was escorted to a rented property in Vancouver. Off-grid. No phone. Only limited internet access. She was told not to leave the property under any circumstance. Groceries were delivered. A nurse lived on site. And once every 2 weeks, she received a sealed envelope containing cash. Sound familiar? It should. Because this is almost identical to what was later confirmed by a whistleblower involved in a surrogacy ring catering to tech billionaires and A-list celebrities. A system of isolation, compliance, and erasure. S didn't even see the baby after birth. She was sedated. When she woke up, the room was empty. Her phone was returned 24 hours later. A driver picked her up and dropped her at a Toronto hotel. The message was clear. You were never here. But trauma leaves a trail. And S didn't forget, especially when she saw photos of Harry and Meghan releasing a first birthday photo of Lilibet taken in the garden of their California estate. She stared at the child's eyes and froze, because those weren't Meghan's eyes or Harry's. They were hers. That's when she broke. She reached out anonymously to a royal journalist through a burner account. Then she panicked and deleted everything. But not before the email was flagged by Charles's ongoing investigation team. It read, "You're looking in the wrong country. The truth is in Canada. She's mine." That's all it said. But it was enough. Charles authorized a private legal team to reach out quietly through a third-party intermediary. And after several weeks of negotiation, S agreed to speak under 3 conditions. Her identity would remain protected. She would not be forced to testify unless Parliament opened a formal investigation. She would be granted a legal assurance that the NDA she signed could not be enforced due to unethical clauses. Charles agreed. And what she gave them? Photos, emails, a DNA report, showing a 98.7% match between her and Lilibet, pulled from a discarded water bottle left behind during questioning. But even more explosive, she provided a video. A selfie, taken in secret, showing her visibly pregnant, dated just 3 months before Lilibet's birth, holding a small white envelope with the initials MM printed in cursive. Her voice on the recording. For insurance. In case they forget I'm a human being. They did forget. But now, the world was about to remember. Because didn't vanish this time. She wanted her story out. And King Charles? He was finally starting to see the full shape of what had been hidden from him for so long. But just as he began to plan his next move, a private courier delivered a package to his desk. No return address. Inside, a thumb drive. A note. One sentence. You've heard from the woman. Now hear from the child. What does it mean to grow up inside a fairy tale that isn't real? To live in a palace of glass, designed by publicists, polished by streaming platforms, and protected by ironclad legal teams? And what if that fairy tale came at the expense of your very identity? This is the chapter where the illusion begins to shatter. Because this isn't about speculation anymore. This is about data, documents, digital breadcrumbs, and the one USB drive that King Charles never expected to receive. Let's go back. Just days after speaking with the woman believed to be Lilibet's biological or surrogate mother, Charles was handed a small padded envelope, delivered via private courier, unmarked, untraceable. Inside, a single thumb drive. No note, no seal, no markings, just one line printed on a tiny slip of cardstock. Play this alone. That's exactly what Charles did. In the early hours of the morning, alone in his study, he inserted the USB into a secure government-issued laptop. What he saw chilled him. The file opened to a short video clip, roughly 22 seconds. A toddler, Lilibet, sitting on a colorful rug in what appears to be a playroom. She's surrounded by books and toys. She looks up, staring directly at the camera. And she says something unexpected. Are you my real mommy? Pause. Rewind. Replay. Are you my real mommy? The voice is soft, innocent, full of that unmistakable toddler curiosity. But it's the response that triggers Charles's alarm. A voice off camera. Female. Quiet. Cold. You don't need to ask that, darling. You're whoever we say you are. Let that sink in. A child asking the most natural, heartbreaking question in the world, and receiving an answer soaked in manipulation. But who filmed it? Who leaked it? And why? The file was encrypted, but the metadata, once decoded by Charles's cyber team, revealed 3 shocking details. The video was recorded inside a Malibu property known to be rented by Meghan during her pre-Montecito days. The camera model used was registered to a known Netflix documentary crew member. The original file name? Rose_D2_01_clip A. Project Rose. Day 2. Clip A. This wasn't a family video. This was footage. Outtakes. Deleted scenes. Archival material from Meghan and Harry's multi-million-dollar Netflix deal. Whatever it was, it had never been aired. But somehow, someone had kept a copy. And they were ready to use it. But that was only the beginning. Also on the USB, a folder titled Legal. Inside, scans of Lilibet's birth certificate. Filed in California. Name, Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. Mother's name, Rachel Meghan Markle. Father's name, Henry Charles Albert David. So far, so normal, until you zoom in. Because next to Meghan's name, under place of birth, the certificate reads, information not provided. In the US, that's unusual, not illegal, but very rare. And for a document tied to royalty, practically unheard of. The omission raised immediate red flags for Charles's legal team. Because while California law allows for partial data redaction in cases of privacy, any such document submitted to a foreign government, like the UK, requires full disclosure for legal recognition. Which means, if that same incomplete certificate was submitted to Buckingham Palace, Lilibet's claim to the royal line of succession may have never been legally validated. She might not legally exist in the eyes of the crown. And guess what? She's still listed as 8th in line to the throne. How? Who approved it? Who let the name slide onto the official succession page without cross-checking the birth documentation? Someone had to sign off, and that someone may have done so under pressure. Because the next file on the USB? A scanned email. From a royal PR aide to a private secretary in the palace. Subject line, urgent, update Lilibet listing. Body text. Instruction received from the Sussex legal team. Approval is expected by tomorrow. No additional verification requested at this time. Timestamp, June 7, 2021. 2 days after Lilibet's birth was announced to the public. 2 days. That's how fast a name was added to the line of succession. No delay, no review, just a rubber stamp. Now ask yourself, would the Queen have approved that? Would Charles? Would William? No, which means someone inside the system. Someone with access to the royal website, the legal team, and the family's public records. Let it happen without asking questions. Why? Were they loyal to Harry? Or to Meghan? Or was it something worse? Was it a payoff? Because included in the same folder was a set of wire transfer receipts. Large sums. 6 figures. Disbursed to a law firm in Santa Monica. Labeled under vague descriptors like consulting, logistics, and digital management. But the most damning? A line item from July 2021. Special file handling, £75,000. What file? Who handled it? What did it buy? Silence. Access. The certificate? Now zoom out. You've got a child questioning her own identity on camera, a missing place of birth, a royal aide approving illegal documentation, 6-figure payments moving through private legal channels. And remember, this isn't even about who Lilibet is anymore. It's about how far Meghan and Harry went to sell the idea of who she was. The perfect daughter, named after the Queen, born into a bicontinental fairy tale, crowned in Netflix glory, but behind the scenes, a tangle of contracts, manipulated records, and a frightened surrogate who still hasn't come forward. Because yes, there's reportedly another surrogate. Not S. Someone else. Someone listed in the Project Rose appendix under only an alias, Jasmine. And according to the USB's final file, she's still being paid, monthly, by a trust connected to Archwell. The document was buried deep, labeled operational expenses. But one page shows regular disbursements to a routing number in Colorado, accompanied by a clause. Non-disclosure remains binding until child reaches 18 years of age. Read that again. Non-disclosure until Lilibet is 18. That's not just caution. That's control. That's a deliberate attempt to bury the origin story of a child whose name was meant to symbolize peace, unity, and family reconciliation. Instead, her very existence is shrouded in contractual secrecy and performative myth-making. So Charles had a choice. He could bury the USB, pretend it never existed. Or he could prepare for war, a public reckoning, a royal correction. But before he could act, another bomb dropped. A royal staffer came forward, one who had seen something in the baby's nursery. A photo that should have never existed. Because in that photo, the child being held was not Lilibet. It wasn't even the same baby from the birthday portraits. According to the staffer, it was a different child entirely. And next to the photo, a label. Shoots 3 to 5. Best angle. Shoots? Best angle? They weren't raising a child. They were producing one. How far would a billion-dollar streaming empire go to protect a lie? Would they erase footage? Would they edit reality? Would they knowingly present fiction as fact if it meant millions of views and a permanent place in royal history? Because if the USB drive proved one thing, it was that Netflix wasn't just a silent observer in the Sussex saga. They were part of the production, part of the illusion. And according to leaked emails, confidential production notes, and testimony from a former showrunner, they knew. Let's rewind to the summer of 2021. The Sussexes had just signed their landmark deal, reportedly worth between $100 to $150 million. The goal? Produce content that informs, elevates, and inspires. But behind closed doors, the deal had one condition, one deliverable that trumped all others. The Sussex family documentary, a fly-on-the-wall, intimate look inside their lives, their home, their love, and, most marketable of all, their children. Archie and Lilibet were the crown jewels of the entire contract. Their appearances would generate headlines. Their milestones would drive streaming traffic. And the birth of Lilibet? That was supposed to be the documentary's emotional peak. But there was a problem. Lilibet wasn't ready for her close-up, because as revealed in the USB files, and now corroborated by multiple former Netflix contractors. There were delays. Footage was missing. Scripts had to be rewritten. Why? Because no one outside Meghan and Harry's inner circle had actually seen Lilibet. At least, not consistently. Crew members noticed it almost immediately. Different hair texture, different skin tone, different height. Sometimes she babbled. Other times. Months later, she seemed eerily silent. One crew member wrote in a production memo, "Child presented as Lilibet appears to vary between shoot days. Protocol unclear. Requesting continuity clarification." That was in early 2022. The response? Silence. Then, a new policy. All crew must remain at least 6 feet away from the children. No direct communication. No unscheduled filming. Then came the NDAs. Extra thick. Extra aggressive. One clause reportedly stated, "Any perceived inconsistency in physical appearance or behavior of minor subjects is to be regarded as confidential production variation and not to be discussed outside the immediate editorial team." What does that even mean? Production variation? Are we talking about toddlers? Or character actors? And that's exactly what one former producer, who we'll call Mark, began to question. Mark was hired as a segment editor. His job? Piece together moments from dozens of Sussex-filmed clips into cohesive storylines. But he began to notice something odd. Some clips had metadata from dates that didn't match the narrative timeline. For example, a birthday party clip marked June 4th, 2022, actually had a timestamp of May 20th. A park scene with Harry pushing a stroller had inconsistent shadows, indicating it was shot at a different location than what was stated in the script. Still, Mark assumed it was just sloppy tagging. Until one day, while reviewing raw footage for episode 3, he noticed something else. 2 different versions of the same scene. Same room, same setup, but 2 different children. One had hazel eyes, the other, bright blue. He froze the frames, overlaid them. It wasn't a color correction issue. These were different kids. He brought it to his senior producer. The reaction? An emergency meeting. Not with editorial, but with legal. He was told, bluntly, "We're working with sensitive parties. Everything you've seen is under narrative protection. You are not to duplicate, share, or discuss anything beyond your station. If you're uncomfortable, you may resign." He did. And months later, when news of Project Lamb and Project Rose leaked to Charles's internal team, Mark quietly reached out. He wasn't the only one. A lighting tech, a sound mixer, even a production assistant responsible for continuity notes, each with stories that pointed to the same truth. The children presented as Archie and Lilibet in the Netflix documentary weren't consistently the same children, sometimes not even the same genders. In one shocking case, a crew member alleged they saw an infant girl swapped mid-shoot after a meltdown. The explanation? She wasn't camera ready. Let that sit for a moment. She wasn't camera ready. This isn't parenting. This is casting. This is manipulation at a cinematic level. And Netflix? They didn't just allow it. They enabled it. Because the Sussex docu-series wasn't journalism. It was branded storytelling. And the brand? The Sussex family. Inspiring. Resilient. Private, yet vulnerable. And most of all, royal. The children were the emotional core. Meghan cradling Lilibet. Archie's innocent giggle as Harry reads him a story. Moments designed to humanize. But what if those moments were scripted? What if some weren't even real? The implications go far beyond entertainment. Because audiences were sold a memoir. A truth. A window into royalty. But what they got was a carefully constructed stage play with questionable casting. Charles, now aware of this possibility, took it personally. Not just as a king, but as a grandfather. He had watched that documentary. He'd felt the tug on his heart when Lilibet met Diana's memory. He believed. And now, he realized he had been played. Worse, the nation had been played. So he began to question everything. The photos, the voices, the nursery shots, the audio recordings of baby babble. Were they even authentic? Could AI have been used? Could Meghan and Harry, in their desperation to control the narrative, have blurred the lines between real life and scripted fantasy? The USB had one more folder, labeled simply, Takes. Inside, clips, dozens of short videos, each marked with takes. Archie Park, take 1. Archie Park, take 2. Archie Park, take 3, all showing similar scenes. Same dialogue, same setups, like reshoots. For a toddler? This wasn't family footage. This was a scene. And at the bottom of the folder, one chilling file. End scene, Charles. A mock-up edit of King Charles receiving a letter. Opening it. Reading. Tearing up. Narrated by Meghan. Scripted words. We hope one day you'll know them as they truly are. Because they are love, pure and untouched by your judgment. He never said those things. He never received that letter. It was fiction, presented as future reflection. Written into the documentary as an emotional arc, never aired, but filmed. Stored, ready for use in another cut. But who wrote it? Netflix? Meghan? Both? We may never know. What we do know is this. Someone at Netflix believed this wasn't a documentary. It was a narrative universe. And the truth was optional. Now Charles had a new enemy. Not just Meghan, not just Harry, but the companies profiting off his silence. He would need to act. He would need to expose the truth, not just to protect his lineage, but to protect the very concept of reality. But as he prepared to confront the Board of Governors, a new scandal erupted. A voicemail leaked from Tyler Perry's mansion. A voice. Familiar. Panicked. They're going to find out. About everything. About the kids.